Good morning, children. In the previous class, we learned about the different examples of the friction. Okay, and in the same way, we learned about the forces which are acting on the book which is placed on the table. Okay, and here, whenever when a book is placed on the table, what are the forces acting on it? The forces which are acting on it is the net force and as well as the gravitational force or the weight of the object. And here, what is the net force acting on it? The net force acting will be equal to 0. Why? Because if the magnitude when an object is placed on the table, which is at rest, then the magnitude of the body of the book or the body which is placed on the table will be equal to what? They may be same. Okay. When the magnitudes are same and they are acting in the opposite direction, then the net force will be equal to 0. Okay. And here, when an object, already I said in the previous class that we are applying some force on the book. Okay. When we are applying some force on the book is moving to a certain distance and afterwards it is coming to rest. Okay. When it is coming to rest, why it is coming to rest? Why? Because as we are moving on it on a table, okay, some force is acting in the opposite direction, okay, towards the motion of the object. As the force is acting in the opposite direction, okay, the book comes to rest. Therefore, we say that the force applied by the floor, the force applied by the floor on the book is called as the frictional force. Okay, and here we are having a lab activity, that is understanding the concept of static friction. Understanding the concept of the static friction or the nature of the friction. Understanding. A is that understanding the nature of friction. Understanding the nature of friction. The nature of friction. Okay? Or the concept of friction. Or the concept of friction. For this, what are the materials required? Materials required, okay, a toy trolley, a wooden block, okay, a toy trolley, a wooden block, a table, a pulley, an extensible wire or a string. Extensible means which is not inextensible. And inextensible, that means which cannot be pulled out. Okay, which cannot be extended. Okay, that is called as the inextensible wire. A pulley, a table. Okay, a weight hanger, and standard weights. Here just I will explain on this one by drawing a diagram. By drawing a diagram. Here we are taking off a table. Okay, a toy trolley. We are placing a wooden block on it. Okay, a wooden block, an extensible string, a pulley, a weight hanger, and the standard weights. Okay. Now what is the procedure? What happens to the wooden block when it is placed on the car? What happens? It will be in the rest position. But when we apply a small force on the weight hanger, a small weight on the weight hanger, what happens? Slowly the toy car will be moving towards the left direction. Towards the left direction. At that position, what happens to the wooden block? The wooden block will be at the rest. Okay, the wooden block will be in the state of the rest when it is moving. Okay, and here he asks some of the questions that what happens? What happens to the block kept on the trolley? It will be in the rest position. Then with respect to the table, what is happening to the block? With respect to the table, the block is moving in the same way the trolley is also moving. Okay. Does it fall or move along with the trolley? Yes, the block will be moving along with the trolley. And now just going on slowly, try to increase the weight. Okay, try to increase the weight. Therefore, what happens? When you increase the force slowly, that means little bit fastly, the block will be moving towards the left direction. In such a case, what is happening means here the block, whatever that is kept, which is there kept on the toy car, it will be exerting some force in the opposite direction. Okay, the toy car will be moving in the forward direction, but the wooden block, it tries to sustain the opposing force on this body. Okay, on this body. And later on, if you going on increasing of the standard weights more and more, what happens? Okay, we find that the block will be falling in the opposite direction. When the car is moving in this direction, the block will be moving in the opposite direction. Therefore, from this, what we can learn? We can learn two types of the friction. Okay, two types of friction. There are two types of friction. There are two types of friction. What is the two types of friction? The static friction. Static friction. Okay. What do you mean by the static friction? The static friction is the friction. Okay. When the toy trolley is moving along with the inextensible string, okay, the block will be at the state of the rest when it is moving. Okay, that means the block, whatever that is there, it will be opposing of the relative motion on the toy trolley. Therefore, here the friction which comes into play when an object is at rest with respect to the another object, then that is called as the static friction. Okay, static friction. Okay, what do you mean by the static friction? The static friction is the friction in which comes into play when the surface of the object are at rest relative to each other. That means if the surface of the object is at rest with relative to the other object, then that is called as a what? Static friction. Next we will be having of sliding friction. Sliding friction. Sliding friction. That means here sliding friction means the friction which is exerted in between of the toy trolley and as well as the table. Okay, that force. That means what is happening? One is moving with respect to the another. That means the friction which comes into play when one object is moving relative to the another. It is called as the what? It is called as the sliding friction. Okay, the sliding friction is the friction which comes into play when the surface of one object moves relative to the surface of the another object. When the surface of the one object is moving relative to the other object, then we say that it is called as a what? Sliding friction. Okay, we say it as a sliding friction. Therefore, the sliding friction between the surface of the table and the toy trolley is the static friction that exists between the surface of the trolley and the wooden block. Okay, that means the surface. The static friction is the friction which is exerting between the toy trolley and the wooden block, and the sliding friction is the friction which is exerting between the toy trolley and the table. That is called as the static friction as well as the what? The sliding friction. Next, we are having of another activity, that is observing the variation of the friction. Observing the variation of the friction. How many types of the friction are there? Two types of the friction are there. What are the two types of the friction? It is static friction as well as the what? Static friction and the sliding friction. What do you mean by the static friction? The friction which comes into play when one of the surface of the object is at rest with relative to the another object. That is called as the static friction. And the sliding friction is the friction which comes into play when one object is moving when compared to the other object, relative to the surface of the another object, then that is called as the sliding friction. Okay. Next, observing the variation of the table. Whenever when you apply, see here, just you think of that there is a hard table or there is a bench. Okay, you can see that in the classroom you'll be having of the bench. When all of your members, okay, on the bench, normally three members are sitting on the bench or two members will be sitting on the bench. Okay, if I ask one person to push that bench, okay, to push that bench on which the two persons or three persons are sitting, will he able to move that bench? No, he will feel little bit harder. Okay, he will be feeling of little bit harder. Okay, to move that bench. Okay, where the two or three children are sitting on that bench. Okay. Okay, that is called as the static friction. That is called as the static friction. If you observe more and more force, even though if you apply the more and more force, the table will not be moving. But if I ask some two or three members to help that person, if I ask two more persons to help that person, when they are pushing, when three members are pushing of the bench, will it be movable? Movable? Yes, it can be movable. That means here, when the applied force is greater than that of the frictional force, when the applied force is greater than that of the frictional force, then there will be a change in the friction, which we call it as a sliding friction. Okay. The remaining we will be learning in the next class. Thank you.